Her name was Madison Hale, a cold, perfectionist CEO who didn't believe in second chances. His name was Evan Carter, a quiet, single dad who worked late nights cleaning offices just to feed his little girl. One night, Madison pretended to sleep, testing the loyalty of the man she had secretly begun to trust. But what she saw Evan do when he thought no one was watching broke her heart in ways she never expected. The city slept beneath a blanket of fog, but on the 32nd floor of Hale Tower, one light still burned. Madison Hale sat motionless on her leather couch, her heels kicked off, her face hidden in shadow. The digital clock blinked 11:47 p.m., another night in her kingdom of glass and silence. Her eyes were closed, but she wasn't asleep. Not yet. Tonight, she was pretending to be weak, pretending not to watch. The elevator chimed softly, and the janitor stepped in, Evan Carter, the man who cleaned her world while no one else was looking. His uniform was faded, his hands rough, the skin cracked from bleach and time. He moved carefully, as if afraid to break the silence she lived in. Madison listened to the rhythm of his mop, slow, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat. She studied him through her lashes, wondering what kind of man still worked this hard when no one cared if he did. He didn't look at her, he never did. To him, she was a ghost, a name on the door, not a person on the couch. He cleaned around her desk, wiped each surface like it was sacred. Madison's breath caught when he stopped near her father's framed photo, the one she hadn't touched in weeks. Evan brushed off a thin layer of dust with his sleeve and whispered so softly she almost didn't hear. "You raised a strong woman, sir, maybe too strong." Her pulse trembled. No one ever spoke about her father in this office. No one dared. Yet this man, this quiet stranger, had done it with such gentleness it broke through the armor she wore every day. She felt her throat tighten, her chest ache, emotions she'd buried under deadlines and power suits. She wanted to open her eyes, to ask him why he said that, but something told her to stay still, to listen just a little longer. Evan straightened, pulled something from his pocket, a crumpled piece of paper. He placed it on her desk beside the framed photo. It was a child's drawing, all bright colors and crooked lines. Two stick figures holding hands under a blue sky. "Daddy's working hard for you, Lily," he murmured. "Someday we'll be okay." The simplicity of those words hit her harder than any boardroom argument ever had. The room felt heavier now, filled with things unsaid. Madison's eyes stung, but she refused to let a tear fall. She watched him adjust the picture frame before quietly returning to his work, unaware of the storm he'd just awakened inside her. There was something sacred about his exhaustion, something painfully human. It made her realize how small her world had become, all numbers and noise, but no heart. He finished cleaning, gathered his tools, and paused at the doorway. For a moment, he looked back, his eyes tired but kind. "Good night, Miss Hale," he whispered, thinking she was asleep. His voice carried no bitterness, only respect. When the door clicked shut behind him, Madison exhaled, a sound between a sigh and a sob. Alone again, she opened her eyes fully, staring at the drawing he'd left behind. Her reflection blurred in the glass, tears finally slipping free. For years, she had judged people by their success, but tonight, she saw worth in someone the world had forgotten. In the quiet, she whispered to the empty room, "Who are you, Evan Carter?" And for the first time in a long time, she truly wanted to know. The morning light spilled through the glass walls of Hale Tower, painting the office in soft gold. Madison sat behind her desk, her posture sharp as ever, but inside she felt shaken, haunted by what she'd witnessed the night before. She had barely slept, replaying every word Evan had whispered to her father's photo. Her mind, usually armored in logic and control, now trembled with something she didn't recognize: guilt and curiosity. She wanted to understand this man, but pride held her tongue still. When Evan walked in that morning, he looked as he always did, humble, polite, carrying the quiet dignity of someone who'd seen too much and complains too little. Madison's gaze followed him from across the room. His uniform was clean but faded, his shoes patched at the soles. He was just a janitor, she told herself, just another name on payroll. But that lie was already falling apart. She pressed the intercom button. "Mr. Carter, in my office, please." Evan hesitated at the door, his cap in his hands, eyes lowered. "Yes, ma'am." Madison's tone was calm but cold. "You were in my office last night." His jaw tensed, unsure how to answer. "I clean every floor, ma'am." She leaned back in her chair, watching him flinch beneath the weight of her silence. "Did you touch my desk?" "Just to dust it. I'm sorry if—" "And the note?" she cut in sharply. His eyes flickered. Guilt, then fear. "The note wasn't meant for you," he said softly. "I write one every night for my daughter. She's 6. She likes to know I'm still trying." Madison froze. The words hit her harder than she expected. Still trying. They echoed in her head like a confession she couldn't make for herself. She looked at the worn edges of his hands, the exhaustion behind his kindness, and something in her chest ached, a pain she hadn't let herself feel since her father's funeral. She wanted to ask more, to understand him, but old habits returned: professionalism, distance, control. "That's all," she said, her voice colder than she intended. Evan nodded, turned quietly, and left the room. The door clicked shut, and the sound lingered in the air like regret. Madison stared at her reflection in the black glass of the window, the image of a woman who had everything, but somehow felt completely empty. Minutes passed. She tried to return to her emails, her schedules, her empire of perfection, but the words on the screen blurred. Her throat tightened as she whispered to no one, "Still trying. I wouldn't know what that feels like anymore." Her father's picture sat on the corner of the desk, the same one Evan had cleaned so gently. For the first time in years, she reached out and touched it. Outside, life went on, phones ringing, heels clicking, success humming through the walls. But Madison felt none of it. All she could think of was a single dad who worked nights for a child who believed in him. Somewhere between pity and admiration, something new had begun to stir, something dangerously close to hope. That night, long after everyone had left, Madison sat alone again in the same spot where she had once pretended to sleep. But this time, she didn't fake it. She closed her eyes for real, praying she might dream of something other than loneliness. In the darkness, one image stayed with her, a crayon drawing of love she never had the courage to believe in. 3 years earlier, Hale Tower hadn't yet worn Madison's name. It still belonged to her father, Robert Hale, a man everyone in Chicago's business world respected, not for his power, but for his heart. He built the company from nothing, treating every employee like family. Madison had grown up watching him, wanting to be just like him, until the cancer came. The night he died, she stopped believing in softness. Strength became her only language, success her only proof of worth. Back then, she wasn't the woman in the corner office. She was just a daughter trying to make her father proud, wearing heels too high and emotions too visible. But grief changed her shape. It turned warmth into armor and kindness into suspicion. Within months, she took control of Hartwell Industries, cutting deals her father would have hesitated to sign. The press called her the Ice Queen of Chicago. She smiled for the cameras, but every night she went home to silence. Across the city, Evan Carter lived a different kind of silence. His apartment was small, 2 rooms above a laundromat, always smelling faintly of detergent and crayons. His daughter, Lily, was the only bright spot in his world. Her laughter filled the space his wife once had. Rachel's picture still hung on the fridge. Her smile faded from years of fingerprints. Evan kissed it every morning before leaving for work. "I'm doing my best, Ratch," he'd whisper, "for her." Life hadn't always been this way. Evan had once been an architectural draftsman, with a house, a plan, and a future. But after Rachel's complicated childbirth, the medical bills came like waves that never stopped crashing. One by one, they lost everything: the car, the savings, the home. When Rachel died, he pawned his wedding ring just to buy baby formula. People looked away when he pushed the stroller past them. Pity was the one thing he couldn't bear. He started cleaning offices because it was the only job that didn't judge him for the gaps on his resume. At first, he promised himself it was temporary, but weeks became years. The mop handle became familiar, the night buses routine. What never changed was Lily, her little voice asking every night, "Daddy, did you draw with the stars again?" That's what she called the office lights he cleaned under. He always smiled and said, "Yeah, baby, they shine a little brighter for us." Meanwhile, Madison's world revolved around numbers and deadlines. She wore her loneliness like a designer suit, expensive, tailored, and untouchable. Her board saw her as unstoppable, her staff as unapproachable. They didn't know she ate dinner alone in her father's old chair every night, reading his last handwritten note, "Don't let this company take your heart." She already had, and she didn't know how to get it back. Fate, in its strange humor, drew their two worlds closer. Every evening when Madison left, Evan arrived, mopping the same marble floors she had just walked across. Sometimes he found traces of her, a coffee cup, a lipstick stain on a file, a faint scent of her perfume in the air. He didn't know her name then. To him, she was just the woman who never turns off the lights. He'd smile faintly, not realizing she was the one he'd soon change forever. And somewhere in that city of glass and loneliness, destiny began to weave its quiet plan, a plan that would bring the Ice Queen and the janitor face to face, not as CEO and employee, but as two broken souls still searching for something they thought they'd lost forever, the courage to feel again. It began on a gray Thursday morning, the kind where the sky looked like it had given up trying. Madison's assistant had called in sick, leaving her to prepare for a high-stakes investor meeting alone. The conference room was still a mess from the night before, coffee stains on the table, files scattered everywhere. Frustration built behind her temples as she barked orders through her Bluetooth headset. "Get maintenance up here, now." When the elevator door slid open, she barely looked up until she heard that same quiet voice. "Morning, ma'am," Evan said, pushing his cleaning cart inside. Madison's hand froze midair. Him, the janitor who'd whispered to her father's picture. She didn't know why, but his presence made her chest tighten. "You again," she said sharply. "The conference room needs to be spotless in 15 minutes. We have clients coming." Evan nodded without hesitation, rolling up his sleeves and getting to work. He didn't talk, didn't complain, just moved with quiet focus, as though every inch of that room mattered. Madison pretended to scroll through her tablet, but her eyes followed him. The way he stacked chairs, polished the glass, even straightened the crooked frames on the wall. He treated everything with care, more care than most of her executives. Then she saw it, a leftover pastry from the catering tray, one she hadn't touched. When she turned around again, he was holding it, hesitating. For a split second, she caught the flicker of shame in his eyes. That was all it took. "Are you stealing from the company, Mr. Carter?" Her tone was ice. The room fell silent except for the ticking clock. Evan froze, the pastry still in his hand. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "They told me to clear the room. I was just—" "So you eat trash now?" she snapped. The words came out harsher than she intended, echoing against the glass walls. Evan took a slow breath, placed the pastry back on the tray. His eyes met hers, tired, steady, unbroken. "Only when it's still fresh." Then he turned away, cleaning again, as if nothing had happened. Madison's throat tightened. That line, "only when it's still fresh," landed somewhere deep, somewhere she didn't want to feel. For the rest of the day, she couldn't shake it off. It replayed in her mind during the investor meeting, over lunch, even as she signed contracts worth millions. Only when it's still fresh. She didn't understand why it haunted her. Maybe because it sounded like something her father would have said. Simple, honest, proud. That evening, long after the building emptied, Madison sat in her office staring at the security feeds on her computer. On one of the small screens, she saw Evan mopping the lobby floor, humming softly to himself. He stopped once to take a folded paper from his pocket, another crayon drawing. He smiled as he placed it near his lunchbox. Her breath caught. She zoomed in just enough to see the words at the top. "Daddy, don't be tired. I love you." For reasons she couldn't explain, Madison found herself opening his file in the HR system. She scanned through the details. Widowed, one dependent child, no benefits. A perfect employee on paper, yet forgotten in every way that mattered. The CEO in her frowned at the inefficiency of it all. But the woman beneath the title, she just felt small, smaller than she had in years. She closed the laptop, stood by the window, and looked down at the glittering city below. Millions of lights, millions of stories, but tonight only one mattered. "Who are you really, Mr. Carter?" she whispered to the glass. The rain began to fall, tracing long silver lines down the window pane. And for the first time in a long while, Madison Hale didn't feel like the one in control. She felt like the one being tested. From that night on, Madison began to notice things she'd never cared to see before. The quiet way Evan greeted everyone he passed, even those who ignored him. How he never used the elevator, always took the stairs with that heavy cart. How his shoes were too worn for winter, yet he never complained. Every evening, she'd pretend to stay late just to hear the rhythm of his mop gliding across the marble floors. It was a strange comfort, one that made her feel less alone. One Friday, she left her office early on purpose, then sat in her car across the street. Through the glass, she watched Evan finish his shift. He moved slowly, his back stiff from years of bending, but there was peace in his motions, like a man who'd made peace with pain. When he stepped outside, rain began to fall, and Madison's wipers struggled against the blur. He didn't hail a cab. Instead, he adjusted his jacket and walked toward the bus stop, holding a paper bag close to his chest. Curiosity got the better of her. She followed him at a distance, headlights dimmed. The bus arrived, crowded, loud, cold. Evan took a seat near the window, pulled out a small paper bag and unwrapped a sandwich. But before he took a bite, he turned to a homeless veteran sitting nearby. "You need it more than me, sir." The man blinked, speechless. Madison gripped her steering wheel as something hot and painful filled her chest. That sandwich might have been his only meal, yet he gave it away. The next morning, Madison called accounting. "Add a small equipment reimbursement for Carter, Evan J., $400. Her assistant hesitated. "He's a janitor, ma'am." Madison's tone sharpened, and he's earned it. She hung up before she could explain herself. But later that afternoon, she saw Evan approach her office with the check in hand. "Ma'am, there's been a mistake," he said softly. "This is way too much." She leaned back, testing him again. "It's not a mistake." Evan shifted uncomfortably. "Then please, let me work an extra shift for it. I can't take what I didn't earn." Madison stared at him, caught off guard by his humility. No excuses, no flattery, just integrity. She swallowed hard and nodded. "Fine," she said, pretending indifference. "We'll find you something." But after he left, she sat there for a long while, unable to focus. No one had ever refused her money. Not in years. Not ever. As days passed, she began to see the cracks in her empire. How many people smiled to her face but lied behind her back? Yet this one man, with nothing to his name but dignity, had more honor than her entire boardroom combined. She started looking forward to those quiet nights when she could hear the sound of his broom down the hall. It grounded her, reminded her that not everything in life was about profit. Sometimes it was about purpose. But the closer she watched him, the more restless she became. Who was this man who could lose everything and still walk tall? Who could give away his last sandwich and call it nothing? Madison didn't like the way her heart responded, the warmth she hadn't felt since before her father died. It scared her. She was supposed to lead, not feel. Yet every time Evan's reflection passed in her office window, something inside her cracked a little more. Late one evening, she saw him pause by the lobby's Christmas tree, the janitor's hands still gloved with cleaning rags. He looked at the ornaments, expensive, glittering, and smiled. Then, quietly, he hung one new ornament near the bottom, a paper snowflake, clearly cut by a child. Madison's breath caught. On it was written, in a child's messy handwriting, For Daddy, so you don't clean alone." And just like that, the Ice Queen of Hale Tower felt her heart begin to thaw. The storm came on a Tuesday, not outside, inside the walls of Hale Tower. Madison had just stepped out of a meeting when she heard laughter echoing from the break room, the kind that sounded mean. She paused, listening. Two executives, men in sharp suits and shallow hearts, were mocking someone. "That janitor's pathetic," one sneered. "Brings his kids' drawings to work like a 5-year-old." The other chuckled. "Yeah, he's milking sympathy to keep his job. Single dads, always a sob story." Something inside Madison snapped. Her heels struck the tile like thunder as she marched into the room. The laughter stopped. She slammed a folder onto the counter, her voice shaking with fury. "You think kindness is weakness?" Her eyes blazed, sharp as glass. "That man works harder than either of you ever have. You mock a father doing his best for his daughter? You're fired, both of you." Silence fell so thick it hurt. No one dared speak. The two men stammered, "But, Miss Hale." "I said get out." When they left, Madison's chest was still heaving. For the first time in years, she'd defended someone, not for profit, not for show, but because her heart demanded it. She didn't even notice the office watching, whispers spreading through the halls like wildfire. The Ice Queen had melted, and no one knew why. That night, as the rain streaked down the windows, she called the one man who'd unknowingly changed her. "Evan, could you stop by my office before you leave?" When he entered, he looked cautious, hands folded, the smell of cleaning chemicals still on his sleeves. "You wanted to see me, ma'am?" Madison stood by the window, her reflection faint in the glass. "I saw what you do here," she said quietly. "How you work, how you treat people. You remind me of someone I lost a long time ago, my father." Evan shifted, unsure what to say. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job." She turned, her voice trembling. "No, you're doing more than that." She walked to her desk, opened a folder, and handed it to him. "What's this?" he asked, unfolding the papers. Inside was a new contract, full-time employment, facilities manager, triple his current pay, full benefits, and health insurance for him and Lily. Evan blinked, disbelief flickering across his tired eyes. "Ma'am, I don't understand." Madison smiled softly for the first time in years. "You don't have to. Just know that good people deserve good things." He stood frozen, emotion breaking through the composure he always carried. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered. Madison looked down, fighting her own tears. "Because you reminded me what humanity looks like." Her voice cracked on the last word. "And because I forgot how to be human myself." The silence that followed was thick with something sacred, two broken souls recognizing each other's strength. Evan's eyes glistened. "Thank you, ma'am. I won't let you down." She nodded, smiling through her tears. "I know you won't, Evan." He turned to leave, but before he did, he placed one small folded paper on his desk, a child's drawing, this time of 3 stick figures under a rainbow. "Lily wanted you to have this," he said quietly. "She says you look lonely." Madison's breath caught and she pressed the drawing to her chest, speechless. When he walked out, the city lights glimmered beyond the glass, reflecting off her tears. For the first time since her father's death, Madison Hale felt the world soften. Not through power, not through victory, but through kindness, something she'd once mistaken for weakness. And in that quiet, rain-soaked office, she realized the janitor she'd tested had just taught her the truest lesson of all, that strength isn't measured by what you build, but by what you refuse to let the world destroy inside you. Weeks passed, and Hale Tower didn't feel the same anymore. The tension that once lingered in the air was replaced with laughter, the faint hum of warmth returning to his halls. Madison no longer hid behind her closed office door. She'd walk the floors now, greeting people, smiling, even helping carry boxes when no one expected her to. And every evening, as the city glowed beneath the Chicago skyline, she'd find herself pausing by the lobby where Evan worked, just to say goodnight. It wasn't business anymore. It was something gentler, something real. One afternoon, Madison entered the break room and froze. On the far wall, a new decoration caught her eye, a collage of crayon drawings, taped carefully in uneven rows. Little suns, hearts, stick figures with wide smiles. In the center hung one she recognized, 3 figures holding hands under a rainbow, with the words, "My Daddy and Miss Maddie." She couldn't help it. She laughed softly, tears threatening her eyes. "Miss Maddie," she whispered, as if the name itself were a gift. Later that day, Lily came by the office, small, bright-eyed, her hair tied with ribbons. Evan had brought her for the company's family event. The girl ran up to Madison with a grin. "You're Miss Maddie!" Madison knelt, surprised by the tiny arms wrapping around her neck. "Daddy says you're his boss," Lily said, giggling, "but I think you're his friend." Madison felt something inside her break, the kind of break that lets light in. She hugged the little girl tighter than she meant to. "I'd like to be," she whispered. From then on, things changed quietly. Madison started taking weekends off for the first time in years. She'd visit Evan and Lily at the park, where Lily showed her how to blow bubbles and name clouds. Sometimes, Madison brought flowers, sometimes just herself. They'd sit on a bench while Lily played and talk about everything: grief, love, life. Evan would listen more than he spoke, and Madison found comfort in that silence. It was the kind of peace she hadn't known since her father was alive. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Madison stayed late to finish some reports. The office was quiet again, like the night it all began. She looked at the drawing still pinned to her board, "My Daddy and Miss Maddie." Beneath it, the photo of her father. For a long moment, she just stood there, smiling through the ache. "You were right, Dad," she whispered softly. "The company didn't need my heart. People did." When she walked outside, Evan and Lily were waiting by the building entrance. Lily held out a paper bag. "We saved you a sandwich," she said proudly. "It's still fresh." Madison laughed through her tears, the words hitting deeper than any business deal ever could. Evan smiled, that quiet, steady smile that once shattered her walls. "You look happy, Miss Hale." She looked back at him and said, "For once, I actually am." As they walked into the night together, the CEO, the janitor, and his little girl, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement like stars. Madison realized that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes it walks in quietly, holding a mop and a crayon drawing. Sometimes it teaches you that strength isn't control, it's compassion. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we all need, a reminder that the smallest acts of goodness can melt even the coldest hearts. If this story touched yours, please subscribe and share it with someone who still believes in kindness.